Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Your second daily dose of happy for the day. And I get 2 daily doses of Cindie myself today, so I get a double Cindie. It's like it's almost like a double scoop Sunday, but it's a double scoop Cindie, so it's close.
Well, I'm glad to be back this afternoon.
I'm glad to have you back. I hope you've been having a good day. I asked you before the show, but have you been doing your 1,000 mantras of I love my life today?
I have. I believe I've completed 1,000 repetitions of my I love my life affirmation for today.
You really
You know what I noticed is that at some point I realized I had this big smile on my face.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's a good thing.
And then you had asked me this morning for some tips, tips on using mantras or affirmations. And it hit me. I was earlier in the other room just doing some chores and realized that I was repeating this mantra in my head. And then I realized that it was in response to a thought that wasn't the best thought.
Oh, really?
So in other words, a thought came in that wasn't great. And my response to it was to say, I love my life.
How did that feel?
And so what hit me is that I've had this experience before with using affirmations and mantras. And I realized that's when you know it's starting to take root, is that it starts to become your automatic response. Even your automatic response to like a thought that isn't the best thought.
And how did it feel when you did that? I mean, you had this not so best thought, and then you started doing your mantra. How did that feel?
Well, it felt great. And I think part of the reason why it felt great is suddenly I realized that I kind of did it on autopilot.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, yes, it's like it's working. Like it's starting to take hold,
I know what you mean, because your mantra is contagious. As it turns out, immediately after the podcast, I found myself doing the same thing. I was repeating your mantra, and I said, well, okay. I mean, I don't really feel like counting them, so I'm not going to really count them, and I'm probably going to mix them in with other things, like I feel rich and a variety of other things. But I've been doing them today, and kind of mixing and matching with whatever felt good, and I have no idea how many there were. I didn't count them, but it's over 100 and less than 10,000.
Well, I think that that's one of the, ways that I know anyway, that it's really starting to have an effect. Those two things that happened, and they both happened sort of by default. And one is that a thought came in that I wasn't really crazy about. And this other part of me, I think it's, you said the rest of me. Abraham says your inner being.
Right.
I like to say, the higher, wiser part of myself.
Okay.
But it's like that part of me responded to that thought that wasn't so comfortable with, I love my life. I love my life. And I went, oh yeah, that's right. But then the other thing that got me is when I was sitting in a chair, I thought, I'm just going to sit here and take my beads in my hand and do a few repetitions of this. And I don't know how many I had done, but I all of a sudden realized I had this huge smile on my face.
Oh, nice.
And it was like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, I must be feeling good if I have a giant smile on my face that I didn't really know was there at first.
Yeah, I had the same experience, actually. I mean, it was a little bit different in terms of the way the events worked, but it was the same general thing. I started doing this thing kind of out of the blue, surprised myself that I was doing it, did it really strongly for about an hour because I was feeling so good. And then I was in the middle of doing other stuff that required my concentration, and then I went out to take a walk. And as I'm doing my walk, I thought to myself, well, first of all, I found myself doing it again, not intentionally. It was just kind of flowing. And then I said to myself, I wonder if this works. I mean, I don't even know what it does for me yet. So here I am, like I'm expanding the experiment already. But I wonder if this also works in some way to help other people. Like Abraham talks about how if you kind of hold somebody else in the highest light possible, you just imagine the best for them and so forth, that you are providing the best kind of influence that you can provide to somebody else. And so I figured I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to modify it with the mantra. So I was thinking about some important people in my life, people who I really want the best for. And I also had my headphones on playing my music as I'm walking along. So I would do one full song on one person thinking, I love my life and I hope that person's having a great day. Or that I hope that person loves their life. In fact, I want them to love their life. And I would just do it for them for like the length of a song. And then the next song would come along and I'd do it with the next person.
Oh, I love this. This is great.
And I have no idea what the result's going to be. I do know most of the people I was thinking about had to do with people who are involved in Louise's gardening services business. So I'm kind of half expecting Louise to come home and say that everybody had a great day.
Well, what's interesting is we talked about this maybe last week, but it was the part in the book we're reading that said the way you know if you are being of benefit, the highest benefit to someone else, is if when you think about them, you feel good.
Mm-hmm. Which
and
I did.
It sounds to me like that's exactly what was happening, right?
Oh, yeah. I felt great. That's why. I mean, I figure I've got all this good feeling stuff, so why just keep it for myself? Let's see who else I can give some of it to.
There's a form of meditation, Brahma Vihara meditation, and one of the ways that I learned to do it, you're holding a person in your mind and you're imagining for them 4 different things. And the first thing is that they would have the word in Sanskrit translates to fatness of friendship, but it just is happiness. It's just community and happiness. And the second one is mudita, which is good fortune. And and it just goes on where you're thinking these thoughts for someone else. And the way I learned it is that you pick 4 people. The first one is someone that you love dearly. And the second one is someone that you may not know very well, or maybe you don't know them at all, or maybe they're the checker at the grocery and you have their face comes to mind, just someone in passing. And the third one is someone that really rubs you the wrong way.
Oh.
And the fourth one is yourself. And so I'm a firm believer that holding someone in that meditative space and thinking good thoughts for them and imagining them enjoying their life is effective. And so then when we read that passage where Abraham says, this is how you know if your energy or your thoughts are benefiting someone, do you feel good when you think about them? And I have to say, when we read that, I realized that there are some people that I love very, very much that I don't feel good about sometimes when I think about them because I realize that I'm worrying about them.
Mm-hmm.
The intention is really well for their wellness.
Oh, sure.
But if they're sick or they're struggling with something, when I think about them, I'm really concerned and worried. And and it doesn't feel good. And I thought, okay, that's not working towards their benefit.
True.
Because what they say that, when you're thinking about things like that, it's like when you're worrying, it's like you're praying for something you don't want.
Yeah, really. That's one of the most amazing concepts that I picked up from Law of Attraction. Like, oh, God, really?
So thinking about them like you did, and I love that you incorporated music for 2 reasons. One, because, music is uplifting. Mm-hmm. So it would support your thought process in the whole thinking about someone and holding them up and imagining good things. And yeah. And then I love that you used one song. It's like the time space. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any beads I was carrying, so I had to do something, right?
I like it. I think it's terrific. It's like, okay, 3 minutes for you. Who got the long song?
Because I realized I also didn't want to limit it to 15 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever. That barely got the thought going. I needed to stay with it for a bit. So I figured, okay, a song length, that works.
I think it's a great tool.
I'm going to try it again. I'm going to keep trying it for a while, as long as it feels good, because I guess ultimately that's the most important reason to do it, right? It feels good.
Well, it's such a win-win because you're being beneficial. Your thoughts are benefiting others and yourself at the same time.
Well, that's what I'm really curious about, and I really don't know how to measure that. I really don't know how to gauge how true it is. I like the idea of it, but I really like to see, does it actually play out? And so I expect that just by saying that, I'll get some sort of evidence over the next 48 hours. But I just really want to know, do I get to see any of the evidence of it?
Well, that's the interesting part that you get to now open your awareness to reports coming back.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Well, we'll just have to see.
I'm excited to know.
But you got me on a new habit. I wasn't even planning to do this habit today. You just got me going. Just by saying, do this. This is what I'm going to do. Like, that's a great idea.
Yay. Well, I'm glad that I feel good about that. So see, I mean, that it's contagious.
It is.
Good vibes are contagious.
Yeah. And it has carried through. I mean, there have been a couple things today that I got to that weren't really good feeling, and I flew through them. I mean, because I had enough momentum built up, at there was enough good feeling experience that I had today for like long periods of time that by the time I ran into the tough stuff, it was like, so what? Flick it away.
Well, that's a good point. That the momentum that we build up. When we were talking about, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago when we were really deep into the section about well-being, and they were talking about, well, you can't just, you can't wait until your head is in the lion's mouth to decide to use these tools. You have to be practicing them all the time. And then when you're in trouble, then they come easier. And it reminds me of that, even in a small everyday way, that we get momentum built up. And then, it's kind of like when people fall in love and it's like nothing bothers them because they're on cloud nine. Right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like, the house is on fire. Oh, we'll take care of it. Blah. So when we get that momentum, that good feeling momentum, and then things come up, like you said, you just kind of cruise through them. So
it's true. And
wonderful.
And we've all been through that. Anyone who's fallen in love with somebody knows what that feeling is like, where everything just seems to work. Everything that happens in life just flows, and it's a wonderful place to be. And when you're there, you say, "How do I keep it going?" Well, now we know something about how to keep it going, which is good.
This is how we keep it going. We go, I love my life.
I love my life.
I love my life.
I even had a rhyme going, by the way. I said, I love my life. I love my wife. I love my health. I love my wealth. I mean, I was doing all this rhyming thing.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I love it. I'd love to know how it's working. And like I said, you asked me, be ready to give a report. So that was my report. I did notice.
Well, I didn't expect to be piggybacking on your report, but I did.
Hey, it's great. It's great. Just think about, we'll have another report for tomorrow. So yeah.
Well, I can hardly wait.
So before we dive in, let's talk about how listeners can subscribe to our podcast.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank all of those who are subscribers, and there are a lot of you, hundreds of you have subscribed and are regular listeners. And we know just because we can see the numbers of people who download every single month, and they hold steady or grows, which is great. And the reason those people are continuing to be subscribers and listening to all the podcasts, and they or maybe not all of them, they listen to most of them. That's the one thing we know for sure. The reason they listen to them is because it feels good. Something similar to like what we were just talking about, where you do this mantra 1,000 times and you feel good doing it, and your mood just changes and improves. Well, listening to LOA Today is another way to do just that. So when you subscribe, all of the episodes come right to your iPhone or your Android or your tablet or whatever kind of device you use, and you can just play them whenever you want to. So here's how you do it. Step 1, go to the website loatoday.net. Step 2, read the directions that will take you about 10 seconds to read about how to subscribe. Step 3, subscribe. Thank you. That's it.
And then step 4, share.
Oh, yes, we have to share. That's right. There is a step 4. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But be sure you do it. And by the way, if you run into any trouble, like I don't know what, but if for some reason you can't subscribe or you don't understand a particular step or whatever, don't be embarrassed. Just use the contact form. Just fill in your name and send out a little message to us, and we'll get back to you. We'll see if we can figure out how to make sure you get subscribed, because we don't want you to have to lose out on getting the subscription just because you run into a technical glitch. Who needs that, right? So
yeah, and technical glitches happen.
They do
to everybody.
Yep.
It doesn't really even the most tech savvy people get glitchy.
And if you find that the glitch is there and you feel like you should be able to get around it, there's a really good solution. Just keep saying to yourself for the next 10 minutes, I love my life. I love my life. I love my life.
Some of us that work with computers and all the time talk about things like that. It's like sometimes you have to get out of your chair and just find a happy thought, go get a drink of water.
Right? Yeah. Oh, it
And
works.
things work out. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, one of the most common things, now I'm a technical guy, and for many years I was providing support to people, both server support and individual desktop and laptop support and so forth. And invariably, this is what happens, and this happens with a lot of IT people. This isn't just me. The person would be struggling. I'd get the call. I'd go visit that person either at their desk or via phone or whatever else. And as soon as I did, the problem would go away. Now, why did that happen? Because it's such a common phenomenon. Almost any IT support person can tell you. The problem disappears the moment the technician shows up. And I think I know what the reason is. The technician isn't carrying all the negative vibe. You're the one who's carrying all the negative vibe. The technician's coming in and saying, okay, this is going to be easy. What's up? And sure enough, it's easy.
Well, that and also, I mean, it's got to be related to resistance.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like we drop our resistance because help is on the way.
Yeah, that helps too. Yep.
Right? Like we know that sometimes there's some problem bothering us and we finally make an appointment to go to the doctor and then the problem goes away.
Pretty much.
The same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing. Yeah. So all that is a long-winded way of saying, if you run into a technical glitch of some kind when you're trying to subscribe, don't stop. Don't give up there. Just hit the contact button. Contact us. We'll help you figure it out because we want you to be a subscriber.
Yes, we do. And I was thinking about you talking about taking your walk, listening to music, and holding the employees of your business in a space of success.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's the kind of boss I would want to have. No, really. Like, have I ever had a boss that said, today I took a walk and, for at least one whole song, I was just picturing you having the greatest day ever. I mean, how awesome is that? And that's what we like to do with our subscribers.
This is true. And that's not a joke either. That's not just something she's kind of spooling up there. Some spinning up. That's actually true. I mean, I often am thinking about our subscribers, and I mean that literally. And I think, wow, how cool. We got all these subscribers. They love listening to us. They keep coming back. How cool is that? I love our subscribers. I do that often. I really do.
Well, it's the best thing ever to hear from someone that's a listener that's had some modicum of success.
Yeah.
And they're connecting it to something they learned on the podcast or just the energy of the podcast. That is like such a win for me. That's amazing. And I know you feel that way too. It's great to get that kind of news. So of course I'm going to hold the subscribers in a place where I'm imagining and envisioning them having great wins. Why not?
Yeah.
So we have been for, I don't know how long, we have been working our way through the book Money and the Law of Attraction, Learning to Attract Wealth, Health, and Happiness, Esther and Jerry Hicks, The Teachings of Abraham. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller, and we've been reading our way through it and discussing our way through it.
And having fun going through it.
Yeah,
this is actually one of the more fun books. I mean, they have, I don't know, more than a half a dozen books, and they're all good. This one's the fun one, and I don't really know why. Maybe because his money is like in the title or something. But a lot of the prose that's in this book is even more positive than usual. Not that they don't have to touch on the negative stuff, because they do, but I don't know what it is. Some of the stuff that's in here is it just makes me feel good to read it.
Well, I think part of it is Jerry's questions, and we are going to get to a few of those today that probably are going to make me laugh out loud anyway. But this section that we're starting with right now, if you're in the paperback and you're following along, we're on the bottom of page 158. But the subtitle is First, I Must Be Willing to Please Myself. And just reading that, when we were discussing earlier about your walk, and you said, I don't know if it's actually benefiting anybody else. I hope it is, but I know that it felt great to me. I was thinking, first, I must be willing to please myself. Abraham says, when you've been on a particular train of thought for a while, it's not easy to abruptly change the direction of your thought because the law of attraction is supplying you with thoughts that match your current train of thought. Sometimes, while you are in that negative feeling mode, another who is not in that negative place will not agree with your negative view of your current subject, which only serves to make you want to defend your position all the more. Trying to defend or justify your opinion only causes you to stay in your resistant state longer. And the reason so many people hold themselves in resistance unnecessarily is because it's more important to them to be right rather than to feel good.
Yeah, that's one that I can resonate with. I mean, for the longest time, that was me in spades. I've gotten a lot better than I was. And, for the most part, I don't do that anymore. But still, I feel it every once in a while. And, as you were reading that, I was realizing the next time I feel that need to be right, to, fight back, to be resistant or whatever, I'm going to try, I love my life. I love my life. I love my life. I'll bet you that'll stop it.
Well, it's interesting because there's a mindset that says for me to win, somebody has to lose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's an energy level that's not perceiving the reality of a possible win-win.
Absolutely. That's true.
Right? And it's the same energy level that says you have to be wrong for me to be right. And there's actually something called wrong making. And it's that place in a conversation where someone will start to try to make the other person wrong because they're so attached to being right. I think it was Wayne Dyer that said, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So it says when you meet those who are determined to convince you that they are right. I think that's all of us at one time or another.
Sure.
And they try to hold you in a negative conversation in an attempt to convince you. Sometimes you are considered uncaring or cold-hearted if you do not hear them and eventually agree with their point of view. But when you forfeit your good feeling, that comes when you choose thoughts that harmonize with your broader perspective, to try to please a negative friend who wants to use you as a sounding board, you are paying a very big price for something that will not help him or her either. That uncomfortable knot in your stomach is your inner being saying, this behavior, this conversation isn't in harmony with what you want. You must be willing to please yourself first, or you will often be swept up by the negativity that surrounds you.
I love my life. I love my life.
I love my life.
My life. I'm telling you, I think that really would be a good antidote to that attitude, to that mind space of I need to be right. Because when you love your life, you don't have the need. First of all, the need can't get in there because you're focusing on something else. But secondly, when you love your life, who cares if you're right? It doesn't matter anymore.
Something that I like to remind myself of is that it's a place of empowerment to decide that you're not attached to being right.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of being confident and being a perfectionist, perfectionism isn't about things being perfect. It's about us feeling safe. And we all want to feel safe. We all want to be confident. Nobody likes that feeling of having no confidence in themselves. But confidence doesn't happen because you're always right or because you know everything. It happens because you're not afraid to be wrong. So when we can lose that attachment to being right, it actually empowers us.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. In fact, I'd even go a step further and say that it isn't just about feeling safe. It's about wanting to have energy. I think that most often when people get in a space of needing to be right, what they really need is to rebuild their energy levels because for whatever reason their energy is depleted.
Oh, that's an interesting concept.
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the safe part. I just think it's more than that. I think it's also the energy thing.
Yeah. And what do you mean when you say their energy is depleted?
Well, I think about the typical human life cycle, day to day. We are up and awake doing things for, maybe, I don't know, 14 hours a day or 16 hours a day or whatever, and then we're asleep for 5, 6, 8 hours at night or something like that. And the reason for the sleep cycle is to re-energize ourselves because we as human beings, and indeed all life forms, seem to need to sleep. And I've often asked myself, why do we need to sleep? Abraham, I think, has talked about it. I don't really remember what they said, but I would imagine it's something along the lines of we need sleep in order to re-energize ourselves. And not just physical energy, spiritual energy, to get back into alignment. Because when you're asleep, they tell us very, very clearly, point blank, when you're asleep, you can't resist. You're moving back into alignment just by sleeping. Well, if that's true for sleeping, why can't it also be true for other forms of energy building when we're awake?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I'm looking at it. So I suspect, because it's very easy to be energy depleted. You're energy depleted whenever you lose some confidence in yourself, when you feel like you're being attacked. You lose energy when things aren't going the way you want them to, and you start focusing on that negative side of it. And oh God, it's not working, and I feel so rotten, and I feel so miserable. That's all energy depleting. Whereas,
well, that's really true. It's a big energy drain. And when we start getting defensive and trying to prove that we're right about something, that's a big energy drain.
It really is. Whereas I love my life. I love my life as an energy builder.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, and don't ask Abraham about sleeping because Abraham thinks we only need to sleep like 45 minutes a night or something. I can't deal with that.
Okay, I promise I won't ask Abraham about it. But I can understand why.
It finally hit me one day when you said, why do we keep asking these non-physical beings about our physical thing? I was like, yeah, that's true. Like when they talk about sleep, they say after a couple of hours of sleep. We're like, what? Okay. So this is the question that I think, because it seems like it's not going along with the flow of the conversation. We've been talking about being willing to please ourselves, being willing to maybe even walk away from a conversation that's creating a lot of resistance and just doesn't feel good. And then Jerry asks if there's an appropriate time to die.
Well, Jerry's all about the energy.
Yeah.
So Jerry says, are there any limits of control for our bodily conditions as we approach 100 years of age?
Oh, that's interesting. Abraham says only the limitations caused by your own limited thinking, and all are self-imposed.
I've thought about that answer for a lot of time, but let's continue for a moment here. Jerry says, is there a time to die? And if so, when is it?
Abraham says there's never an ending to the consciousness of you. So really there is no death. But there will come an end to the time that your consciousness will flow through this particular physical body that you identify as you. It's up to you when you withdraw your focus from this body. If you've learned to focus upon good feeling subjects and you continue to find things in this environment that excite you and interest you, there is no limit to the amount of time that you can remain focused in your physical body. But when you focus negatively and chronically diminish your connection to the stream of source energy, your physical experience is then shortened. For your physical apparatus cannot sustain long term without source energy replenishment. Your negative emotion is a signal that you are cutting off the source energy replenishment. Get happy and live long.
I love my life. I love my life. I love my life. I love my life.
So I have a question about that, though. Because occasionally we hear a story about someone who seemed to have lost their life prematurely. Mm-hmm. They were young. They were full of joy. They had hopes, dreams, goals, and then something happened. Mm-hmm. I have a niece that was probably 17 and was getting ready to have a scholarship to college, and she loved to skydive and, all these things. And she was just so full of life, and car accident. Mm. And so I'm curious, when we talk about connection to source energy and the fact that there's no end to the consciousness of us. There's just an end to the time we have in this body. We've talked before about the idea of sacred contracts, so to speak, that we chose a certain incarnation. We talked about people coming into this life with challenges, maybe health challenges, and the idea that Abraham said, look, if you take a seasoned professional athlete who's a award-winning champion, do you think they always want to go out on the tennis court and play somebody who they can easily beat? No, they want a challenge. And sometimes people choose to come into a life where they'll have some challenges. So I'm curious, well, wouldn't that also be maybe someone that would choose ahead of time for their life to only have a certain span or maybe end a certain way? I don't know. Just,
You're talking about sacred contract kind of thing. And that could be. I don't really know. Here's what I think. This is in part influenced by something that happened long before I discovered what the law of attraction was. Mm-hmm. On my mother's side of the family, I had a cousin who was very much into motorcycles. He was somewhat of a rebel, not tremendously a rebel, but he was, like in many families, there's the one kid who's a little bit more rebellious than the others, that kind of thing. But one day he disappeared, just plain disappeared. And his family knew that he had taken his motorcycle out. He'd been out on the motorcycle, but they just never found out what happened to him. He just disappeared entirely. And eventually he was declared presumed dead.
Oh, wow.
My sister, a number of years after that, had it's not really a psychic reading. Are you familiar with the church, what do they call it? It's a spiritualist church. I can't think what it's called. And there's like a series of them around the country. Basically, you go into this place, and it's not like a Christian church or any other kind of religious church. Rather, it's a whole bunch of people who basically get psychic messages that they pass along to everybody else in the group of people meeting there. I don't know if you've ever seen that kind of thing. I've been to one. My sister's very much into them. Well, anyway, she was at one of those meetings, and one of the psychics in the group got up and said that that psychic was coming to my sister, and that there was a message. The message was from Kent, my cousin who had passed along. And the message from Kent, for my sister to pass along to our cousins and their family was, it was all my mistake. I screwed up. I just did this really dumb thing and ended up getting me killed. And it was me. I just did it. Now, she got no other message than that. But it was a really interesting message to get because, first of all, the psychic had no idea who Kent was. Secondly, my sister probably hadn't thought of Kent in a number of years. And then all of a sudden, here comes this message about Kent. And,
wow.
And the message was he owned up. It was him. Now, if we had all kind of looked at it from outside, we'd have said Kent was enjoying his life. I mean, he loved motorcycling. He just absolutely loved it. So how could he have had that kind of a bad experience? Well, he's basically telling us, it was on me. It was my due. I did it. It was my own fault. I'm the one who caused it. I'm the one who got myself in that place. And that means to me, now that I understand what Abraham teaches, that means to me, I don't know what goes on in somebody else's head. Just because I see what looks like a happy person doesn't mean I necessarily know that person's happy. Just because I see a sad person doesn't mean that I necessarily know that person is sad all the time. I don't know what the predominant emotional state is.
This is true. And the predominant vibration, very, very true.
So
what
how can I possibly judge?
Is that some things are just a mystery to me.
Yeah. I mean, people come and people go, and when it happens, I say, okay. I don't know what to make of it. I'm sad that you're gone. I'm sad that person's gone, but I mean, I don't know what was going on in their lives. I may know that maybe they died of some disease. Maybe I know that. What does that tell me? It tells me they had a disease. How did they acquire it? Well, Abraham tells us we acquire it through our own thought processes. Doctors say, well, it depends what the disease is. And certain diseases, we know what causes it, and other diseases, we don't know what causes it. Okay, so I sit back and I look at that person, or I think about that person who died from disease X, and the doctors are saying this, and Abraham's saying that, and I ask myself, do I really know what that person died from? Not really. I wasn't that person.
Yeah. So this leads into Jerry's next question pretty perfectly.
It pretty much does. And the topic is, are all deaths a form of suicide? And Jerry just asked point blank. So, all deaths are a form of suicide?
And Abraham says, well, that would be one way of stating it, since everything that you experience comes about because of the balance of your thought, and no one else can think your thoughts or offer your vibration, then everything that happens in your life experience, including that which you term your physical death, is self-inflicted. Most do not decide to die. They just do not decide to continue to live.
There is an interesting distinction right there. Very interesting. Most do not decide to die. They just do not decide to continue to live. Because deciding to live, that can mean a whole range of things to different people, right? I mean,
this reminds me of the whole concept of resistance and allowing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
It may not be that I'm resisting, but I may also not be allowing. It's kind of like that neutral place.
Which, of course, is a form of resistance, but we don't always think of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think about somebody who says that they're just not deciding to continue to live. What are different examples of that? Well, somebody who, maybe they themselves experienced the death of a close relative. Maybe their lover died. Maybe something like that. Maybe a parent died. And they just give up living. And
we've talked about that, the will to live, how powerful the will to live is.
You just give it up. And if you give it up long enough, guess what? You've carried on a stream of negative thought for a long enough period of time. Yeah. I could see how that could lead to your own demise.
I think about your story about Kent.
Yeah.
And the message of, hey, it was on me. I made a mistake. I did something foolish. It was just, I did it. Which reminds me of, this, most do not decide to die. They just do not decide to continue to live. Maybe that's just risky behavior.
Could be.
It's just that the idea of doing something risky, was more present. They were more aligned with doing something risky than they were keeping themselves safe and making a different choice.
What I do know is that, because I can honestly say to myself, I really don't know why people die. And I don't really know what's going on in their minds. I don't really know what their predominant emotional state is. I really don't know any of that, because people can fake it, right? People can fake it and you don't necessarily know. So because I can't really know that, then I have to assume that in every case, I don't know it. I can't assume that I just don't know it in certain cases because I can't quite figure it out. But in other cases, I know because I can tell. I mean, I can't assume that, right?
Yeah, we really don't know.
Which really means that any time that there's a situation that comes along, like your niece, your 17-year-old niece, who had this everything going for her and she just died, I don't know what her mindset was. I just don't know.
That's such a good point, because we really don't. And that's been proven to us over and over, in situations where we thought we knew something, and then whatever happened in the end just did not prove out.
One of the things that happens a lot is, we all kind of play the game of trying to discern what's going to happen with person X because of some situation that we're involved with person X, right?
Right.
Or what is it that person X is going to do next, and usually it's in the context of what self-destructive thing are they going to do, or who are they going to strike out and who are they going to lash out at, or how are they going to become a victim, or whatever it might be. But we're trying to gauge this stuff, and it's amazing on those occasions where we find out what was actually going on, how far off we are. To give you an example, Joel told a story very recently about how he was at a meeting of people who were involved in, I think it was involvement in helping kids who did not have parents get adopted, especially the hard cases, the ones where the kids who get most easily adopted are usually the babies or the infants or the very, very young ones. When a kid gets up at over age 10, 11, 12, up into that range, it becomes harder and harder to find adoptions for them. And that's the kind of kid that this group works with. And they're all in the Richmond area where Joel lives. Joel's on that committee. Well, they also have a sponsor, their main funding source, who provides all the money for them to be able to do the stuff that they do. And the funding source was at the meeting, and they were giving the report. I think they had found 15 homes for 15 kids that past year, which is phenomenal considering how hard these kids are to place. And the sponsor was sitting there just kind of looking dead in his eyes and so forth. He wasn't saying anything. He had this sad look on his face. And then abruptly he got up and left the room. And Joel said, "Oh my God, what have we done?" And he was comparing notes with some of the others who were in the room afterward. And one of them was saying, I normally bring him his coffee. I didn't bring his coffee. I wonder if he's mad at me. And another person was saying, well, I had a telephone call with him the other day, and I said something that wasn't really right. He must be mad at me. And there were all these people with all these conjectures about why this person had left the room. Well, Joel ended up taking the bull by the horns, as Joel usually does, and he contacted the guy directly, and he said, "I hope we didn't say anything to offend you." And the guy says, "Oh, Joel, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that I'd left you like that. I just gotten a note that my godson needed to be picked up at school, and there was nobody there to pick him up, so I had to rush off to go pick him up." Completely different from what everybody else thought was going on.
Right.
And the guy went on to say, I don't want you to think that I don't like what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are doing. I'm so glad we had so much success, and I really apologize for not letting you guys know. I was really, really happy about it. Completely different from what they thought was actually going on with the guy.
Yeah, it's so true. We just don't know.
So
we just don't know.
Making the assumption that we do know based on, that person had everything going for them, or that person had 3 strikes against them, or whatever. You don't know. You just don't. That's the only honest thing we can honestly say. We don't know.
Well, and it was making me think about how many times people have said what I just said. Now, in her instance, she was driving her car on the interstate, and another car just, slammed her over the guardrail. But in so many instances of suicide where people say, Robin Williams, right? Where people assume because he's funny and he is always making people laugh or whatever. There's been lots of times when people have ended their own lives and everyone has been shocked, saying the same things I said about her, right? It's like, they seem so happy. They had everything going for them,
Right.
And so, which brings us to Jerry's next question.
Which is, how do you feel about those who do decide to die and commit what we call suicide?
And Abraham says, it makes no difference whether the thought you are thinking is one you have deliberately chosen to focus upon, or whether you are merely lazily observing something and therefore thinking the thought. You're still thinking the thought, offering the vibration, and reaping the manifestational result of that thought. So you're always creating your own reality, whether you are doing it purposefully or not. There are those who seek to control your behavior for many different reasons, who even wish to control your behavior regarding your own personal experience. But their frustration level is great because they have no way of controlling others, and every attempt at that control is futile, wasted effort. So many are uncomfortable with the idea of people deliberately removing themselves from this physical experience by way of suicide. But we want you to understand that even if you do that, you do not cease to exist. And whether you depart this physical experience by way of deliberate suicide or by way of not deliberate release, the eternal being that you are continues to be and looks back on the physical experience you've just left behind only with love and appreciation for the experience. There are those who are filled with so much hatred as they live in their physical experience that the chronic pinching off from source and well-being is the reason for their death. There are those who simply are no longer finding interesting reasons to focus and remain, who turn their attention to the non-physical, and that is the reason for their death. And there are those who have not come to understand energy or thought or alignment, who desperately want to feel good and can find no way of stopping the chronic pain they have lived for so long that they deliberately choose to reemerge back into the non-physical. But in any case, you are eternal beings who, once refocused in the non-physical, become whole and renewed and completely aligned with who you really are.
Interesting statement that they made. There are a lot of interesting statements in that bit there that you just read. But the one that caught my attention, let's see if I can find it again. um, those who leave by way of suicide, the eternal being that you are continues to be and looks back on the physical experience you have just left behind only with love and appreciation for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people who will hear that, who will perhaps look on their own lives or look on the lives of people that they know who've had miserable lives, and they'll react, how on earth could you possibly look back on that and feel love and appreciation for the experience?
Well, I think this is the same idea that we've talked about several times of the choice that we make. And it's one of the reasons why I always steer away from labeling certain things good or bad, labeling certain things good or bad, or labeling emotions negative or positive, because I think they're all valid and important. And what if, we've talked about I love my life. We were talking about I love all areas of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love everything going on in my life, not just the good parts, the happy, good feeling parts, but everything. What if we made the choice to come into a challenging incarnation because we wanted to actually experience that?
That's possible.
I mean, I don't know why someone would do that, because being here, it seems like I only want to experience things that feel good.
Yep.
It seems like I resist things that don't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a memory of what I chose from the non-physical.
And that's just it.
Yeah.
That's
so what
just
if
it
we
right
do?
there. Yeah. And how about the question that as I framed it? Well, how about that person that I know who led this miserable life? How could they possibly look back on it and feel love and appreciation for it? And the answer is, how can we know? It's the same question, just turned from a slightly different angle. But it's the same question about why it is that this wonderful person who had everything going for her died. Why is it that this other person who seemingly had a miserable life committed suicide? Why is it that this other person who was always healthy got sick? And the answer is we don't really know, because we don't know their mindset. And that's just as true of somebody who went through what we consider to be a miserable life and passed on to the other side. We don't know their mindset.
Right. It's like this section that says there are those who are filled with so much hatred as they live in their physical experience that the chronic pinching off from source and well-being. It's like, why would someone want to have that life?
Mm-hmm.
But they also talk about someone who wants to feel better and doesn't know how.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is the mystery.
And I think it's a mystery that can never be answered, because the only way to answer it is to live through the experience of dying, which means those of us in the physical life can't answer it. It's just not possible for us.
Because we forget.
And even then, the answer is going to be different from person to person. So there's no way to quantify it. There's no way to say, well, on average. I mean, you mentioned Robin Williams, right? Robin Williams committed suicide after a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, in which he found himself kind of disconnecting from his own humor in some sense. And there was a lot of speculation, well, that's what it is. And you know what my reaction is? I don't know that. I mean, I know he had Parkinson's because I've heard that report. I know he committed suicide. I've heard that report. I know that just seeing film of him in the last years of his life, he definitely looks different than he did. So I know that much, but I don't dare, especially now after reading this stuff, I don't dare conclude that I know why he committed suicide.
Yeah, we don't know.
We just don't know. And that's the only honest thing we can say about it. Well, actually, we can say a second thing, which is what Abraham said, and that is, no matter what you do, whether you die through committing suicide, or you die of a disease, or you just lose interest in continuing, or whatever the reason is that you end up going through the death experience, ultimately it doesn't matter because you continue on anyway.
And we're all going to go through the death experience, I think.
I imagine so.
Walt's going to live forever.
No, I'm just trying to live as long as I can. I want to see how far I can go. I just want to see, can I exceed the norm? Can I surprise some people? Can
I
I
thought it
surprise
was
myself?
I thought it was funny. Somewhere back here, Jerry asked, as we approach 100 years of age. And what I was thinking when we read that is, this will be really funny, like 30 years from now,
Oh, yeah.
when people read this old book.
Mm-hmm.
Like I read Florence Scovel-Shinn and Neville Goddard, and those books were written, long, long ago, right? Decades ago. So decades in the future, when someone reads this, it would really be funny if the average lifespan was like 130 years.
It would actually not surprise me at all. Because
It wouldn't surprise me either, but
200
they would be reading a book and saying, "Oh, isn't that funny?" That
Yeah,
was
right.
like before the 4-minute mile, right?
That's
That was
right.
back when people thought it was really great to make it to 100.
And at that point, one of the little kids will say, 4-minute mile? I thought that the problem was the 3-minute mile.
Yeah, really, seriously. So Jerry goes on to ask one last question, I think, in this little segment.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was still thinking about the 4-minute mile there. So Jerry says, so do we each then choose to some degree how long we're going to live in each life experience?
And that's what I was bringing up before. I'm curious about it. And Abraham says, you come forth intending to live and joyfully expand. When you disregard your guidance system, continuing to find thoughts that disallow your connection to your source, you diminish your connection to your replenishing source energy stream. And without that support, you wither. And you were talking about that replenishing our energy.
Yes.
And you were mentioning that we think of sleep as replenishing our energy. We expend energy all day, and then at night we go to sleep and we get our energy. It's like the refueling station. We get our energy replenished. But then you also said that you were thinking of certain activities as energy replenishing, like the mantra, I love my life.
Mm-hmm. And I think they are. I think all of that can be energy replenishing. In fact, even the term energy replenishing, I think, is a little bit misleading, because it isn't so much replenishing as it is letting it back in again. Because what we're talking about here, they call it here very clearly the source energy stream. Well, that stream constantly flows. The energy is always there. And as Abraham has said many, many times, we can be pretty good at pinching ourselves off from it.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting, the way they expressed that it was someone who was full of hatred.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're pinching yourself off from it, then it does seem like when you stop pinching yourself off, it seems like you're replenishing yourself. It seems when you go to sleep, you're replenishing yourself. It seems when you say, I love my life, you're replenishing yourself. But I think what actually is happening is we're removing resistance. We're just allowing the energy back in.
Well, it was funny because when you were talking about saying that Abraham talks about when we go to sleep, that we can't keep resisting while we're sleeping.
Right.
And it reminded me that I have a friend who is a major manifester. And one of the things that she does when she's frustrated or when she's, resisting something, she just goes and takes a nap. Sure. And she has like story after story of times that something was, not quite going right, or she was really feeling resistance, and she just went and took a nap. And when she woke up, like a miracle happened, and I think it's so funny. I always laugh because my story is, and yes, I realize that this is just a story that I create, but I've never been a good napper.
Oh, me neither, actually.
I don't like taking a nap. I usually, if I do take a nap, I wake up with a headache, or I'm all groggy, or I feel worse than I did before. So
you too, huh? Because that's exactly what happens with me. Exactly.
So naps have never been part of my repertoire because my experience says, oh, that's not going to work. That's not going to be good. You shouldn't do that. So of course I don't. But then I hear stories like this and I think, goodness, I'm a little jealous of those people who are great nappers who can just say, okay, I'll be back in 20 minutes. I'm going to go drop all this resistance.
Yeah. What are we missing out on, right?
I guess it's just up to us to find other ways to drop the resistance.
Well, we do. I love my life. I love my life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's one of my main ways of dropping resistance. And it was before I even developed this idea that I had actually that came to me in a dream about this affirmation, because one of the ways that I drop resistance is by choosing to see if I can love whatever it is. And it's not always the easiest thing to do, but just the suggestion often brings a shift.
Mm-hmm.
So like physical pain, what if I actually viewed this as something that felt good?
What you do? I mean,
financial problems. Well, what if I actually am liking this? What if there's some part of me that actually wants to be in this situation?
That actually is so true that it pisses me off.
And see, part of you loves being pissed off. So it's all working out.
No, I'm serious. Because I recognize at times that I'm setting myself up. I recognize times, not all the time, but there are a number of times where I've noticed that I am doing or saying things that ensures the result I don't want. And when I notice it, I say to it's almost like a V8 moment. Like, oh, wow, I could have had a V8.
Yeah, we are always winning the game we're playing.
That's true, yeah.
And yeah,
it's annoying, but it's true.
Why am I playing this game? I'm doing it so well. I mean, I've got the victim thing down, you know? I can really, really go into victim mode if I want to. And I hate being there, and that's a good thing because I've recognized, I can identify certain things in my life that will take me right down that path. And so I know not to go there.
I can now appreciate my wife's viewpoint because I think I've told you before, my wife spent 10 years as a psychotherapist. And it's an interesting thing to be married to a former psychotherapist. Not only because it's kind of like when I do podcasts with you guys, I now have 7 coaches, right? I have 7 co-hosts who are all life coaches. So I get the benefit of being in conversation with all these co-hosts who are life coaches. And I get very much the same thing with Louise because, her background, I get the benefit of her knowledge. But it also works the other direction. It also works the other way around. And one of Louise's favorite things to say and to point out is, she'll teach me some concept, some idea about how the human mind works and how we tend to, behave certain ways and set ourselves up and so forth. And so I'll notice that she's setting herself up, and I'll say, you're setting yourself up. And her reaction will be, darn, I can't get away with anything anymore.
That's right. See? Well, I was going to say, my husband would tell you something similar.
Oh, really?
I live with a life coach. What do you want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then he gives me my own stuff back.
Yeah, and you can't get away from it.
He calls me out on my stuff, yes.
But that's what happens. That's the way it feels when I read this stuff. When we're doing Money and the Law of Attraction or any of the other Abraham books or any of the books that we've talked about with all the co-hosts on the podcast, any of these books, invariably I find my thoughts coming back to me and haunting me. Like, oh God, yeah, I used to do that, or even I still do that. Oh, jeez, right. I can't cut myself a break here.
But what's good about it is that we're not attached to being right. So we're not defending ourselves that, well, it's actually okay that I've had these thoughts, right? It's just like, yeah, we know we've had those thoughts.
We certainly have.
It's all part of the human experience,
It is.
So it's all good.
It's all good.
Or it's all valid anyway.
I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of both. We have about 45 seconds left before the music plays again. And before we go, first of all, I want to remind you, do the subscribe thing if you haven't already done it. We gave you the instructions earlier how to do it. But I also am trying to make it a point to ask each co-host to tell more about how people can reach out to them, because we have so much talent here and so many people with so many different skills that our listeners might find useful. So if someone wants to reach out to you, Cindie, how do they find you?
They can find me online, cindiechavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ. I would love to connect.
I think everybody loves to connect, but we especially love it when you do it as a coach. But you can also call the show, by the way. Same place that you find how to subscribe, right below that. Here's how you connect to the Zoom platform that we use. So, think about doing that again sometime, too. Give us a call. Just tell us what's going on. Say hello. We'd love to hear from you. Cindie, it's been great. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.
I'll be back tomorrow morning.
Well, good. I'll be here, too. We hope you join us as well tomorrow here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.